Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 58, Riddle Me This. The episode begins with Ash and the gang on a boat, officially on their way to Cinnabar Island. We're actually gonna fucking make it there. We're actually gonna do another gym battle now. Holy fucking shit. Brock is talking to Ash about how there's a mysterious Pokemon lab on Cinnabar Island as well, but Ash doesn't fucking care about that right now. He just cares about getting that goddamn volcano badge, finally. He then starts to worry, though, as he looks around the boat and notices the fucking pure amount of people that were on the ship, worried that they were all going there to get a gym badge. If that was the case, then he would have to fucking wait outside the doors for hours, thus delaying our gym battle episode even further. Even more unfortunately for Ash, one of the people on this ship was also Gary and his cheerleading squad, who had decided to go to Cinnabar Island for a simple vacation, not even for a gym badge, even though Gary should be looking for badges, right? I mean, he's looking to go to the Pokemon League too, but it's Gary, what do you expect? Gary immediately hears Ash stating his worries about how many potential trainers he would have to go through, and immediately clarifies that everyone else on the ship was like him. They weren't going for a gym battle, they were simply going to tour the island as tourists. And adds that no trainers have actually been to Cinnabar Island for fucking years at this point, since the days of Professor Oak even. Ash initially doesn't believe Gary, as why the fuck would there be a gym on Cinnabar Island if there was no trainers that wanted to participate on it? Gary then further states, though, how there was no gym on Cinnabar Island after all, which would explain why he was only going there on a vacation, despite also looking for badges. Ash is initially fucking shocked by this. I mean, like, he's been told to go to Cinnabar Island for like 30 episodes at this point, and now there wasn't even a gym there? Ash then uses his critical thinking skills, though, and he's like, no, that can't be right, that makes no sense, and absolutely denies Gary's claim, proudly declaring that he would get a volcano badge from the gym leader and rub it in Gary's face as he ran off the boat as it docked on Cinnabar Island. Brock and Misty chased after him, but they weren't the only ones. Jigglypuff was as well, revealing that it was still trailing our protagonist. With Ash and the gang finally on Cinnabar Island, they look around to find the gym, still believing that it was there, but they then start to believe that maybe Gary was right after all, as all that they can find are a whole bunch of concession stands and souvenir shops, and just shit dedicated to tourists, indicating that yes, tourists were the only fucking people at this place. So if tourists were the only people here, where the fuck were the original residents anyway? Brock points this out, as he's like, why the fuck would people come to this place to tour it if there's no actual residents of this place? Like, all it's known for is being a tourist spot, but what's there to tour? It is then that a man with a weird-ass outfit arrives, and implies that he was spying on Ash and the gang, as he immediately answers Brock's question, but with a riddle, being, what do tourists think is hot and cool? Ash and Brock have no fucking clue what this dude's talking about, as Ash suggests that maybe it was sleeping in a warm blanket in front of a fridge for some fucking reason, but Misty has a smarter answer, as she guesses hot springs, because get it? Hot springs were hot, and the tourists maybe thought they were cool, and the man confirms that Misty was right, yay! The man then explains that Cinnabar Island essentially had a whole bunch of hot springs due to the volcano on the island, and it was because of these hot springs that there was a fucking immense amount of tourists coming. He states that despite this seeming like a good thing, it wasn't, as despite the tourist industry booming, it did kill another type of tourist, which was the Pokemon trainer, as any Pokemon trainer that would come to battle the gym would be immediately overrun by tourists. Like, they would have to fucking, like, run through crowds and crowds of people, and that deterred them from wanting to come to the island. This leads the gang to then question the man if there truly was a gym on Cinnabar Island after all, wanting to see if Gary was telling the truth. But the man doesn't confirm nor deny, instead giving them yet another riddle, which is, where do you put your glasses? Ash and Brock are once again fucking stumped. They cannot figure out what the fuck this dude's talking about. But Misty is somehow the smart one again, as she's just like, well, you put your glasses in front of your eyes. And the man's like, exactly, the gym is right in front of your eyes. Ash and the gang are immediately confused, as they had literally just looked in front of their eyes, and the gym wasn't there. It's then that they realize, though, that that's because the gym was actually just a pile of remains. The man explains that the gym was literally just a pile of remains because it had been closed down a long time ago because serious trainers stopped coming to the island. The only trainers that would still come to the island were simply just regular-ass tourists who had no interest in getting badges or going to the Pokemon League, so it rendered the gym useless to the point where the gym leader was like, you know what, fuck that shit then. If none of you guys want to come and support my gym, then I'm gonna close it down and find a new job. The man then transitions the subject of the conversation by going like, yo, speaking of new jobs, I run an inn called the Big Riddle Inn, and I want some profit, so if you ever need a stay, then come and here's my business card, and come and stay at the inn. So, a disappointed Ash is left with a business card in his hand as the man then disappears. With the apparent lack of a gym after all, Brock then suggests that Ash and the gang go and look for the island's Pokemon lab that he was telling them about, as he wanted to see it. However, when they arrive outside the lab, though, they immediately just see a whole bunch of souvenir stands, indicating that the lab had been turned into a tourist spot as well, and now it was essentially impossible to even enter the fucking door because there were so many tourists blocking the way. Ash then gets hungry from seeing all the food in all the souvenir stands, but he knows that they don't have enough money to buy shit, so he's like, you know what, let's just get the fuck out of here, we can't get into the lab anyway, so they leave and attempt to find a place to stay for the night, as it was getting late. Speaking of food, though, Team Rocket was selling some Meowth-shaped cookies on one of the lab's souvenir stands, doing so to kill time before nightfall, which was when they would make their strike on the Pokemon lab and attempt to steal the Pokemon inside. Meanwhile, Ash and the gang had arrived at Cinnabar's Pokemon Center to stay there for the night, but they find it, once again, overrun by tourists, just like every other fucking place on this island, so there's no room left for them there. So they go and they search around town, looking for any sign of a hotel they could stay at, as that was the one thing this island seemed to have, was hotels, due to having so many tourists. But despite the abundance of hotels, every single one declined their stay, as they were all full. As they very sadly and very hungrily walk out of the last hotel in the entire town, being rejected by it, Ash looks inside the window to the hotel, wishing that he could be inside there, especially when he spots a huge feast going on. He can't look at this feast for a long time, though, as then one of the people inside the hotel notices him staring in there like a creep and walks out to greet him. It's revealed that this person was Gary. Of course he managed to find a hotel. Gary immediately makes fun of Ash and the gang for how desperate they looked for food, and tells them to look inside, as he gets amusement from their desperate looks, as they really wanted all the food that was inside. He then goes on to further make fun of Ash and the gang for not being able to find a place to stay by rubbing it in that his place had Pokemon that would perform musical performances for them for no additional charge. These two Pokemon were a Hitmonlee and an Electabuzz, who were dressed in super cool costumes. He at least claimed they were cool. They looked pretty average to me. When Gary sees Ash and the gang still just foaming at the mouth over the food, not giving a shit about any of the performances or nothing, he then gets the idea to offer them the leftovers of the food if they would spin around in a circle 3 times and say Pikachu, wanting to get a good-ass laugh out of Ash and the gang's desperation. Pikachu immediately goes to do this as he tries spinning around, but then Ash picks him up and he's like, Pikachu, I'm starving as fuck too, but even I'm not that desperate to go to Gary's level. He clearly just wants to make fun of us again, and I'm sick of that bitch, so don't spin in a circle. Gary just takes this as Ash's desperation to not be overshadowed by him, and begins laughing his ass off at Ash's desperation, calling him pathetic. He then returns into his hotel, wanting to go listen to the singing Pokemon, when suddenly it's revealed that there was more than just an Electabuzz and Hitmonlee inside Gary's hotel room, but none other than Jigglypuff was there as well, and it had just arrived, wanting to join in on the singing. Ash, Brock, and Misty immediately recognize the Jigglypuff, and don't waste any time in running away, knowing what would lie ahead if the Jigglypuff sang. Togepi didn't, though, as it wasn't acquired when the gang first met Jigglypuff, so it tries to stay behind, wanting to hear Jigglypuff sing, but Pikachu manages to grab it before they go. Gary also wasn't aware of what Jigglypuff was capable of, so when it sat on the chair in between Hitmonlee and Electabuzz to start singing and proceeded to do so, Gary and his cheerleaders let themselves be serenaded by the singing, which caused them to obviously fall asleep, just like anyone else who listened to Jigglypuff. Jigglypuff gets absolutely furious at this as usual, and proceeds to use the marker to draw on all their faces, including the Hitmonlee and Electabuzz. Meanwhile, Ash and the gang were now just sitting at an abandoned park, truly not having anywhere to go for the night, when Brock then suddenly remembers the card for the inn that the man had given them earlier in the day. Wow, I wonder why they only remembered that now. You think when they were looking for a hotel, it would have been the first one that they thought of, right? But it didn't appear like the business card was going to help them much anyway, as although there was directions to the place, they were in riddle form, and the riddle was, if you look near the swing, you should see my hands, or at least my face. Ash and Brock are stumped for the absolute 3rd time, due to just not being good at riddles, and Brock just simply looks at the swing, being like, dude, there's nothing by the swing, what the fuck is this guy talking about? Misty is once again the smart one, though. I don't know why she's the riddle expert. When she hears hands and face, she thinks of a clock. Due to the hands on a clock, I guess. Now, that seems pretty contrived, but I guess if you were looking around the area and you managed to spot a clock tower, then maybe the concept of the clock would be fresh enough in your head that you would think of it for the riddle, but I don't know. Misty then spots a clock tower in the distance and asserts that that must be the place where the inn was located, so they run over to the clock tower, where, sure enough, the man was located. His inn was a fucking clock tower. That's actually pretty cool. I don't think I've ever seen that before, but he's very pleased that Ash and the gang had solved the riddle, unaware that Misty was the only fucking one who could actually do anything. But as a reward, he still gives all 3 of them free rooms for the night and a full-on dinner, which is what excites Ash the most, as he was the most hungry out of anyone there. In fact, he was the entire reason why the man even offered them dinner in the first place, because his fucking stomach was grumbling so loud, the man was probably starting to get annoyed. We then cut to inside the Pokemon lab, where we see a Hitmonchan doing a punching bag, we see a Hitmonlee diving into a pool, and we see a Poliwhirl swimming around, and a Machop lifting some weights, in addition to a Machoke. This reveals that the lab had a room to it that was meant for Pokemon to train themselves so that they could reach new heights and therefore potentially unlock new things for people to study. That's at least my justification. I don't know why else there would be a gym inside the fucking Pokemon lab. But anyways, we then cut to Team Rocket, who is right outside the lab, ready to go through with their plan like they said they were going to earlier, which was blowing up the lab's roof with a fucking bomb. They knew that they weren't going to be able to get anywhere with Pokemon battling this time, so they were just like, you know what, we're just going to throw a bomb and see what happens. Obviously, the bombing attracts the attention of some tourists, to the point where one of them calls the inn and informs the man of the attack. Now, they could have just called the inn because maybe it was the only place that they could think to call, as this dude always gave around his business cards. But maybe this signified that this dude was viewed as an important figure in the town in some way? Anyways, the man then informs Ash and the gang of what the situation was, leading Ash and the gang to immediately assume Team Rocket was responsible and decide to go and help. In the time it took for Ash and the gang to arrive, Team Rocket had managed to use a net to bring up all of the Pokemon from the Pokemon lab, and were bringing them into their balloon to take them away. Ash and the gang then interrupt, though, with Ash sending out his Pidgeotto and having his Pikachu jump on top of it, and have the Pidgeotto fly up to the balloon, and have Pikachu use Thunderbolt, which frees all the Pokemon from the net and sends Team Rocket blasting off. Man, that was a short-lived plan. Awesome. The man, who had went with Ash and the gang, is immensely pleased, and as a reward for saving the Pokemon, he decides to give them yet another riddle, being that firefighters couldn't win. Ash and the gang are obviously confused by this yet again, as the man clarifies that the riddle would lead them to a secret gym that was built by the city's gym leader, implying that it was only for those who were worthy, that was built in case there were ever a trainer to come on the island again. Ash is happy at the fact that he may actually have a chance to have his gym battle after all, but is depressed at the fact that he has to deal with yet another riddle. Later that night, Ash and the gang decide to indulge in what the tourists love so much, the hot springs. They all debate on what the riddle could mean, with not even Misty being able to come up with anything. Ash and Brock you expect, but the fact that Misty couldn't, man, this must have been a tough riddle. Misty is then pulled out of her thoughts when she notices Togepi walking around the hot spring as it goes up to a huge Gyarados statue and proceeds to step on its head, which activates a switch. This switch proceeds to move a boulder from the hot springs, which destroys the gender barrier that was separating the boys' and girls' rooms, revealing that there was a secret cave behind the barrier this whole time that nobody knew about. Ash and the gang aren't able to focus on this right away though, as with the gender barrier destroyed, they're instantly shocked to see each other in their swimsuits, causing them all to scream in embarrassment at each other. Knowing they couldn't continue into the cave while they were looking like this, they all put their clothes back on, silently promising to themselves never to mention this again. They then all entered the cave, which immediately started with a staircase, which they descended downwards. After walking a bit farther, they comment on how fucking hot it is. Gee, I wonder why. It's almost like you're underground in a cave of an island that has a volcano on it. But eventually, they reach the end of the pathway they were walking on, which is revealed to be a dead end that leads to a door. Ash tries to open the door, but his hand fucking burns because it's so hot. But he manages to persevere and open it anyway, really hoping that there was a gym on the other side. And there in fact was. There it was, the secret gym. Suspended over a whole bunch of fucking lava, implying that the area was somehow linked to the island's volcano. Well, that explained why it was so fucking hot. Before Ash and the gang can question where the gym leader is, the lights of the gym then turn on as the man with the riddles reveals himself. Brock then replies, now figuring out the answer to the man's riddle, joking how there was no fucking way a firefighter could win against this much lava. Instead of congratulating Ash and the gang on figuring out the riddle though, he simply gives them one more riddle, which is, it's not a hat, but it keeps your head dry. If you wear it, you already lost it. Ash and Brock are stumped once again, but Misty manages to figure it out. I guess she hadn't lost her magic for solving riddles after all, as she states that it was a wig. The man confirms this as he pulls off his hair, revealing that it was a wig, and he was in a disguise this whole time. He was disguised because he was none other than Blaine, the Cinnabar gym leader, and he didn't want anyone to recognize him, as he had wanted to drift away, obviously, after closing his gym. Ash and the gang are immediately shocked by this, more so shocked at the fact that Blaine would try and make himself appear younger. Like, the dude looked like 50 in his disguise, but he looked like 90 out of it. Anyways, Ash quickly moves past his shock, just fucking dying at this point to finally do his 7th gym battle, and he finally gets to, as Blaine sends out his first Pokemon, being a Ninetales, leading Ash to go on his Pokedex and learn some shit about it, where he learns that Ninetales was a Fire-type Pokemon, and Blaine was the Fire-type gym leader. So, this leads Ash to send out his Squirtle, knowing that he would have the type advantage with a Water-type. This makes him extremely confident, like, oh yeah, water versus fire, water's got this, bro. But Ninetales' Fire Spin is so strong that it fucking obliterates Squirtle's Water Gun, and knocks out Squirtle in one attack, as Squirtle tries to escape by going into its shell, but even its shell gets fucking charred. Ash then decides that type matchups clearly didn't matter in this battle, and decides to go fire against fire, sending out his Charizard, although he was heavily reluctant to, as he obviously knew that Charizard likely wouldn't obey him. But I mean, Charizard was probably his strongest Pokemon overall, so I guess he just wanted to take the chance. As for Blaine, despite proving that type matchups clearly didn't matter, he then decides to switch out his Ninetales for his second Pokemon, Rhydon, which Ash also uses the Pokedex on, revealing that it was a ground type, which would give him the advantage over Charizard. Blaine then goes for the first attack, going to use Horn Drill, but Charizard refuses to do absolutely anything to counter, as Ash feared. And not only does he just not do anything, he fucking flies away and goes to a rock in the gym and decides to sleep on it, leading Blaine to laugh at the unfortunate event that had just occurred to Ash, but then proceeding to disqualify Charizard due to him technically being unable to battle, since he left the arena. Ash is like, god damn it, I should have known that Charizard wouldn't listen, and then decides to go for the strategy of utilizing his most trusty Pokemon, being Pikachu, as he sends Pikachu out. The first thing Pikachu does is dodge the Rhydon's Horn Drill, and then it gets up to use a Thunderbolt. However, with Rhydon being a ground type, the Thunderbolt does absolutely no fucking damage whatsoever. However, Ash then comes up with one of his many bullshit strategies that he'll come up with throughout the series, which was to use Rhydon's Horn as a lightning rod for the Thunderbolt. So he tells Pikachu to strike the Rhydon's Horn, and it does, which shocks him. Now, when I first saw this episode as a little kid, I always justified this by the horn being like a different material than the rest of the body or something, so that's why the electricity managed to affect it, and you know what, we're just gonna go with that. Blaine then commends Ash on his bullshit and sends out his third Pokemon, being his strongest, which is his Magmar. Ash proceeds to use his Pokedex on it, and while he does, Magmar takes the opportunity to dip itself in the gym's lava, strengthening its fire powers. Despite this, thankfully for Pikachu, he's able to successfully dodge a lot of Magmar's initial fire punches, save for a few. But then, when Pikachu tries to counter with a Thunderbolt, its electric attacks prove to have no effect, as if Magmar were a fucking ground type. Brock reveals that the reason why this was because Magmar was using its own body heat as an air lens, which was diffusing the electricity. Thanks for that explanation, Bulbapedia. Can I just pause to give an immense thanks real quick to Bulbapedia and Cerebi? Without them, I would not have some of the explanations for a lot of this bullshit. Due to Pikachu being unable to use any of its electric attacks, it's soon left defenseless and unable to continue dodging a lot more of Magmar's fire punches, to the point where Pikachu gets punched to the edge of the arena, close to falling into the lava. To make matters worse, Blaine then calls for Magmar to use its most powerful attack, Fire Blast, and it heads directly towards Pikachu, as Ash panics, not knowing what the fuck to do. And we end on a cliffhanger. Holy shit, this is like one of the first times that's happened. Find out next time on Pokemon Ball Z.